po fillojmë me sesionin e pasdites, ku do të kemi disa prezentime, pra disa publikime shkencore që do prezantohen nga zotërinjë këtu, zotërinjë dhe zoja me mua këtu në panele. Pa humbur kohë, po fillojmë me prezentimin e parë, është doktor Alban Zogaj. Alban?
Profesori po kërkon unë me qëndru në panel, por me qenë se tash jam edhe mësim dhënë si ri, unë ndi vetën mirë kur qëndroj në kombë edhe jo ma afër juve në këtë mënyrë. Atëherë, ju falenderoj shumë për pjesëmarrje, kam kënaqësinë që sot prezantoj në këtë event me 22 vjetorin e Riinvestit. Kam kënaqësinë që prezantoj para kolegëve të mi, po edhe musafirëve të nderuar. Unë do të vazhdoj prezantimin në gjuhën angleze. Më është kërku edhe në fakt e kam edhe më të lehtë me prezentu këtë punim shkencor tim në gjuhën angleze, por do të mundohem ta prezentoj ngadalë në mënyrë që edhe të përkthehet për audiencën nëse është e mundur me u përkthy disa prej koncepteve teknike. So I'll continue in English. Thanks a lot. The paper which I will present is on international monetary fund programs and their impact on economic growth, with specific focus on transition economies. Actually, I'll try to answer two critical questions. One, which are the countries that actually participate in IMF programs? And second, those countries that do participate in IMF programs, do they gain? Do they benefit anything? What are the impacts on economic growth of such countries? So my name is Alban Zogaj, and I was part of Riinvest Institute, and I'm part of Riinvest family. Currently, I work for Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is a US state agency for development. And I'm trying to implement some of my learnings with IMF in MCC these days. And I also teach at Riinvest College, and I'm proud about that. Okay, so is this working? Okay, so I'll very briefly introduce IMF, although I know that many of you now have an understanding of what is International Monetary Fund. And then I'll continue with objective of my study, of my research. I'll give a brief introduction to literature review, what others did in this empirical research. And then I'll continue with the key questions on who are the countries that participate in IMF programs and what are the impacts on growth. Always, when I say countries, afterwards it means transition economies, because my specific focus was on transition countries overall. So, as you may already know, IMF is a worldwide leading financial institution. One of the biggest, with around $1 billion of budget only for administrative, let's say, issues and cases. So a huge institution that has worked with all, let's say, almost all developing countries through the world since 1970s. A very important institution, an institution for which many researchers and economic analysts discussed, and still is one of the key issues discussed worldwide in terms of aid and financial support towards developing countries. Currently, the IMF's role worldwide is, as we used to call, a crisis manager, but also a development financier, meaning that IMF supports countries in need to grow, mainly through two key programs called standby arrangements, which means giving or providing short-term balance of payments support to countries with, let's say, countries with balance of payments problems. And also, what is more important to my view and to my analysis is that IMF is recently providing poverty reduction and growth facility. So giving funds to countries that are in need, that aim economic growth and that have problems with financial or financial problems overall. So these two are actually my focus of analysis and are part of my research in my analysis. So in theory, International Monetary Fund can support countries in three ways. Through the money, through the funds they provide for countries, they influence economic growth, they influence economic performance. They also influence economic performance through policy conditions that they attach to any of the programs they implement. So this is very important to emphasize. When IMF introduces a program with a country, they usually attach some conditionalities with such programs. And lastly, but not least, the policy advice they give overall. And we saw today in the first session that IMF is also very much let's say, engaged in Kosovo through all these three channels. Not a lot through the first one, but mainly through policy conditions and through the policy advice they give to our country, even though I have to emphasize that Kosovo was not my focus of analysis due to the lack of empirical data. So what was my objective of this study? I wanted to try and answer two critical questions. What are the determinants why countries participate in IMF programs? Why engaging with IMF programs? And what kind of problems you need to have in order to participate in such programs? And then to try and analyze what is the impact of such countries if countries actually do participate in such programs. And of course, many other economists tried to answer these questions. This is a broad empirical literature, and they did it through many, let's say, approaches, analysis. There are a lot of studies with before-after approach, so they tried to see what was the country before the IMF program, and then what are the situations and what is the economic performance after the program. And then there are a lot of critiques regarding such approaches. Without approach was also one of the highly used that tried to find counterfactuals and then seeing what happens if you have an IMF programs and what happens if you don't have an IMF program. So trying to compare with a counterfactual, even though it's very difficult to find a control group. And I also do emphasize in my analysis that this is a very difficult approach and very difficult to find very similar control groups, especially when we talk about countries. Analysts, they can do that when they do it with firms, because you can find a very similar counterfactual in terms of firms, but very difficult in terms of countries. The next one is actual versus targeted approach that compares actual outcomes to the respective targets that are set together with the IMF. So IMF and the country, they set the targets, and then analysts, they try to compare what happens when, and do actually countries reach targets. But again, this is a very difficult approach to use. And of course, regression analysis, which is very much used in more recent analysis, and it is also the approach that I used in my analysis, even though we have to emphasize that there is an endogeneity problem with all of the regression analysis in this particular topic. This is just a brief introduction to the literature review. I said this is a broad topic, a broad research topic. Many economists dealt with this topic, and they find very different results. Some find positive impact of IMF programs in growth. Some find zero impact, no impact at all. Some find negative impact, and that's why it's always an actual, let's say, topic to discuss and to try to further develop. So all of these other respected scholars and professors, they analyze developing countries overall with different approaches. And my approach to go and further advance this topic is to actually research only transition economies. 20 transition economies in 20 countries. And this was like let's say, a slogan of my research. 20 countries in 20 years. So, just to conclude, very, let's say, different results in empirical literature review. And these differences come due to different approaches used, due to different data used, but also due to different period of times. So what I did is trying to capture the effects, initially the determinants, why countries take part in IMF programs, and then trying to see what are the impacts of such programs when countries participate in IMF programs. And what I did is, using a number of standard macroeconomic variables and also adding some political economy variables, which I think is an ingredient in my analysis. Because IMF is considered to be a political institution. So my idea, together with my colleagues, was to try and see whether political economy variables such as proximity with US policies, proximity with EU policies, mainly through UN agency data, trying to see whether countries that are more in line with US policies tend to participate more in IMF programs. Our approach follows two famous papers, one by Barrow and Lee, which is a seminal paper in this literature. Barrow and Lee, Nobel-winning scholars and professors, and also the other one by Dreher, 1 year after the Barrow and Lee. But our extension comes in three directions, in three ways. First, we use a very different set of data. We use transition economies in order to see how IMF influenced the economic performance of such countries, very, let's say, interesting in our context here. Second, in addition to Barrow and Lee, we include country dummies, which is very important as a control variable, as an additional control, but also to ensure adequate statistical specification. And third, we deal with autocorrelation problem, and I don't want to go deeply into these technical issues here. So in order to find what are the determinants of participating into IMF programs, I used two models, Tobit and Probit. In Tobit case, the dependent variable is IMF loans to GDP. So what's the size of the loan to the economic let's say, size of the country overall, and this is a continuous variable. So we use Tobit model. On the other case, we use Probit model, and then the dependent variable is only a binary variable, where we say if country participated in IMF, that's a 1 value, if not a 0 value, and then we just look whether what are the determinants of participating or not in a country. And I have to emphasize that the results from both models are very, very, very similar to each other. And I will show results very, very soon. So data are compiled from 93 to 2013, 20 years in total, in 20 transition countries. This is the list of countries, and the main source of data is World Development Indicators from World Bank, but also IMF data on the IMF programs and the size of the loans, and also conditionalities attached to such programs. But I also used, as I said, UNGA data to see whether countries have similarities in terms of voting, similarities with US and with EU countries, to see whether political variables influence decision making. These are some of the well-known macroeconomic variables that I have used as explanatory variables in my models. So, as you can see from this table, not very well, but I'll try to emphasize, countries that have problems with GDP growth tend to participate more in IMF countries, in IMF programs, sorry. And this was one of our main hypotheses, that countries in trouble try to go to a doctor. And it is called doctor-patient relationship in many cases from authors. And I have found here with my data that yes, countries that have problems with growth tend to participate more in IMF programs. What is important when we look at the OECD membership, countries that are part of OECD countries do not participate, and this additionally proves that bigger countries, more economically well countries, they do not participate in IMF programs. And what is important to conclude is that I don't find true, let's say, influence of political variables on the decision to participate with IMF countries. Although other authors find strong, significant, and robust, let's say, influence of political variables, in my models I do not find that, even though all are positive in all of the specifications. Now, if I'm on time, I'd like to move to another question. What are the impacts of IMF programs when countries are part of such programs? I have used 6 estimators, 6 different models to see the impacts of such programs in countries, in transition countries. Starting from the very simple OLS estimator towards fixed effect estimator, 2-stage least square, which is my favorite estimator in this case, difference GMM and system GMM estimator. All initial regressions include same set of independent variables, such as the log of per capita GDP, the proxy of human capital, so education mainly, the fertility rate, investment share to GDP, all that, and all the key macroeconomic variables that I described earlier. This is a basic model of growth where we have GDP per capita in country at time t-1, so lagged in order to see for a longer period of time. It's not a long, it's 2 years period of time, but we try to see not only at the current when countries participate in programs, but also what happens in the further years. You have GDP growth, and then a vector of growth determinants, mainly macroeconomic variables, a country fixed effect, and a shock. So according to this model, and moving through 6 different estimators, in all of the cases, I find negative impact of IMF programs in economic performance of the country, in GDP growth of the country. All statistically significant in all different, let's say in 6 different estimators. And this is also in line, and this is the same when we try with a lagged IMF loan to see the lagged impact. Again, I find negative impact of IMF programs on GDP growth. And to emphasize this negative impact is on the first 2 years of the program. So further question also for other scholars, for students, is to try and see whether the same result stays for a longer time, let's say 5 years or more. But due to the very, let's say, small data set that I had, 20 countries in 20 years, so around 400 observations, it was impossible to move towards a longer period of time. So I emphasized and I estimated for a very short period of time. This conclusion is very much in line with other empirical literature, with Barron-Lee, Dreher, Hutchinson, Conway, 2005, Conway, 94, very, let's say, important analysis and papers on this literature overall. So my explanation of these negative signs is that IMF attaches conditions with its programs, and then such conditions, usually let's say the decrease in public spending in many of such countries, though the decrease in public spending will harm economic growth, especially in short period of time. So the next thing to do is to try and analyze this relationship in a longer time period. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you.
Faleminderit Alban, faleminderit për këtë prezantim. Ndoshta kish më qenë mirë ta kishim pas edhe në këtë sesionin pas ditës përfaqësuesin e Fondit Monetar Ndërkombëtar këtu. Ndoshta ai nuk do të pajtohej me ty, por gjithsesi këto janë rezultatet e punimit tuaj. Atëherë nëse kemi ndonjë pyetje prej audiencës lidhur me punimin që sapo u prezantua. Po në Alban. Mikrofon tuta.
I'm a bullshit English. Okay. Thank you, Alban, for your wonderful presentation. Just sort of a question that goes back to the very title of the paper. If countries are somehow involved with the IMF when they're in distress, should we just not say the impact on growth, but maybe on stabilizing?
Okay, I'll try to answer the question, but also to reply to Visar's comment. It's true that IMF usually, and IMF officials, they usually use this argument. Yes, this is a doctor-patient relationship. A patient will come to a doctor if they are sick. And if they're sick, we need to give antibiotics to them. And our programs are antibiotics to a patient. We put conditionalities, we put pressures, mainly on, let's say, balance of payments, and IMF usually says that we are very good at inflation target, we are very good at balance of payments target, we are very good at opening countries. So growth is not our main target in our programs, even though in recent decades growth has become a key target of IMF programs. For example, Barron-Lee, they say it's better if you don't actually go with IMF programs. Don't go at all, because in a short period of time it will harm a lot. The IMF argument, a contra-argument to this is that, okay, wait a bit, wait longer, 5 years or more, and you will see the positive impact. Which I agree, but we need more data in order to see that future positive impact. Of course, Mr. Hashani Alban, many other authors, they tried to analyze other aspects of IMF programs, saying macroeconomic stability, balance of payments, current account stability overall, and they find positive impacts. Also inflation, they find significant positive impacts on, for example, price stability overall in countries. So yeah, that's true, I agree.
Okay, thank you Alban. Faleminderit Alban. Pyetje tjetër nga audienca? Any other question from the audience? Urno, profesor Silman.
Shka mërmenja ju si eksperti kësaj fushë, a vanun hapa për mëneja, përsoj për këtë zhvillimit ekonomik të vendeve në tranzicionin dhe vendeve të botës së tretë. A kuptove pyetjen?
Profesor, do të mundohem shkurtimisht me u përgjigj në pyetjen tënde, e cila është me interes edhe debat i sotëm, debat aktual botëror, për arsye se sot akoma ekonomistë të shumët po debatojnë rreth rolit të Fondit Monetar Ndërkombëtar në botë. Edhe flitet për një ndryshim roli të Fondit Monetar Ndërkombëtar, siç kam përshtypjen unë, anim ka banka botërore, për arsye se këto dy institucione janë si motra me njëra tjetrën dhe shumë shpesh edhe i përsërisin edhe aktivitetet edhe format e influencës. Unë konsideroj që Fondi Monetar Ndërkombëtar është institucion shumë i rëndësishëm, edhe kisha me përdor një term too big to fail, edhe shumë i madh për të ndryshuar ose radikalisht për të munduar me themi, sepse ka pas ide edhe me eliminu të gjithin. Unë konsideroj që do të ketë rol në vazhdimsi. Ka pas rol shumë të rëndësishëm në vendet e tranzicionit, sa i përket hapjes, liberalizimit të tregut, liberalizimit të çmimeve, hapjes për investimet jashtme direkte. Pjesëmarrja e Fondit Monetar Ndërkombëtar në vendet e tranzicionit ka dhënë siguri për investitorët e jashtëm për të qenë pjesë e atyre vendeve, dhe unë konsideroj që ka pas një ndikim të jashtëzakonshëm në këto vende. Në growth, në zhvillim ekonomik, tregohet nga shumë studime të tjera, por edhe gjetjet e studimit tim thonë që në rritjen ekonomike ka efekt negativ, sidomos në afat shkurt, për arsye se vendos kushtet kryesisht vendosen në shpenzimet publike. E ne e dim që shpenzimet publike në këto vende kanë pas një rol tepër të rëndësishëm. Kështu që influenca e IMF-it ka ndiku negativisht edhe në rritjen e këtyre vendeve. Por të mirat kanë qenë në anën tjetër, kështu që nëse mundohemi me balancu atë, do të shohim që efekti i gjithë mbarshëm është pozitiv.
Ato qështë në vitin 2002 Riinvesti ti e ko njeri jetër, edhe ju të gjeshtë një kontri, po ne i kem përmend ato praktina. Do të thotë si nuk e ka lujt si mas me rolin e vetë historik si duhet, se edhe banka botërore, por si të mos Fondi Monetar pa tjetër duhet të reformohet. Këto institucione duhet të lëshojnë logiken që ajo shka është e mirë për klasën kapitaliste transnacionale, është e mirë edhe për botën tërësi. Unë me shtashknu, aty është për problemi jam se ju jeni tri, unë jam pension, aty edhe me folë në isan, nuk të mundën më bojgjohë ju, në ashtë të kushton karriera, unë shumë për karriera.
Faleminderit profesor për komentet tuaja. Atë nëse nuk kemi pyetje tjera, po vazhdojmë me punimin e radhës. Në
radhja në Florin Aliu dhe drejt Musullit.
Jo, mund është të me ardhë me ullë këtu.
Hi everybody. So first of all, I want to thank Alban for very, very interesting results, and I strongly believe on those results because I believe on this, not these right-wing economies that markets can do everything, and it's really pity that we didn't have the results for Kosovo, but I hope very soon Alban and maybe other scholars will deliver the results also for Kosovo, because we need to know. We have a lot of IMF policies that have been conducted here, but still we don't know the results. In all areas, in some areas we already see and we feel them every day. So our topic is different from, we could say, mainstream topics on science. And the name of the topic is the modeling the fundamental value of the company, the case study of electricity distribution and supply company CATS. And we are grateful for this paper and for many projects that have been conducted in the area of valuation, which I'm leading the second project of Czech Science Foundation project, katërt project, which deals with the automotive industry in the Czech Republic. And the first project they are both supporting, it's internal grant project of Thomas Bata University in Zlín. The aim of our project is that there have been many controversial debates concerning the value of the companies, you know, when they have been sold in the privatization process, both social and state-owned companies. And as we know, that electricity distribution is key input, not only for the economy, but also for the daily life of the people. So we consider that according to the outcomes of the papers, you could check in Google Scholar, Web of Science, Scopus, we haven't seen that there was attempt from scholars to find the fundamental value of the company. What is the value of the company that have been privatized? And many people said that, you know, the company has been undervalued in the privatization process, but there was no clear scientific outcome why it has been undervalued or which are the reasons. So we have been trying to do something with certain limitations. And, you know, I mentioned, because the topic, it's about privatization and the value of the company. And as far as I have seen, the only serious study about privatization is the PhD topic of Alban, which I mentioned, I could cite here. And Alban considers, according to his results, that in former Yugoslavian countries, privatization has increased efficiency level, sales volume, while it had negative effect on the employment, which I'm not able to give any comment. This is not the area I cover, but is the only serious study that you could cite. Besides, you know, some attempts from different scholars on on the wish, but not on scientific results. And our topic does not consider the cost and benefits, from this privatization process, but strikes the initial process, the value of the company, which is the value of the company. And we have used methods, which is my PhD topic of IPO process, like the initial public offering, the company when it's private and it gets listed to the stock market. So the same methods we have used for valuation of Kosovo electricity distribution CATs. According to the GAP Institute, which is it's not a scientific paper, but I don't know if it is kind of brief policy, they confirmed that there was a lack of transparency from the Kosovo government during the privatization of CATs. And if it's true, if it's not true, I don't think that you can prove that scientifically. Maybe it's more depends to the journalist to find out that. But as far as when it goes to the empirical study, the study lies on the valuation issue. Valuation is one of the most problematic issues in the finance. And we have here mentioned Damodaran, which is the father of company valuation, but he deals mainly with the public companies. And it's much easier to evaluate them because the prices are updated daily, while the private companies, they have their financial statement, and the financial statement are based on historical costs. And many authors differentiate itself, they say that valuing company based on assets is better than based on cash flow. But now it's already confirmed that investors are more interested on cash flow. Not on how much profit, how much sales you generate, but how much cash flow. There are good companies and all over the world that generate good sales, good profit, but negative cash flow, and they go bankrupt because they are selling on invoice. They can't collect the cash. So, like the real economy is different from these financial markets. And as George Soros said that, like you might think that you are in equilibrium in the financial market, but you could be quite far from equilibrium because the price today reflects the outcomes of the future. It's hard to build literature review on this issue because this is more about modeling, like it's not like a founding causal effects that you would see some variables to what extent they are influencing. So we specified the model. The most problematic issue in valuation is beta coefficient. And for the Czech Republic, I already built and calibrated the qualitative beta based on model 5 forces and McKinsey 7S. And I have done also for the airport of Kosovo, which will be published during this May, and you will see that is better outcomes than on beta coefficient. While the other problematic issue is the capital asset pricing model, and return on market and beta coefficient, beta coefficient is mainly obtained from the regression analysis between the stock market and the returns of the company. Facing this limitation in Kosovo, that we don't have stock markets, and even if you have, like Czech Republic has, and I had a lot of problem with the Prague stock market because it's inefficient form. The prices do not reflect the all underlying settings of the economy. And to make it more clear, like we know when in United States, when President Obama mentions something, the markets are moving, but in other countries, when somebody is mentioning or producing some reports, the markets are not moving. So it means the information transmission is very slow, and that creates space for arbitrage. And capital asset pricing model is not the best model you could use, but still is the best existing model. It's built by Sharp, 1964 and Linter, but stands on portfolio diversification of Markovich portfolio frontier. All this model is built mainly for United States because it's built mainly for efficient markets. While I feel a little bit sorry here because I use a square root, so square root shouldn't be there because you have another square there. So it's when I was writing the model, it's material and methods. You know, the data are secondary data collected from the financial statements of the company. The discounted cash flow model has been used. Also normal geometric progression, which I have built in Visual Basic, and also Monte Carlo simulation, which delivers the outcomes, future possible outcomes. I used for the first time Monte Carlo simulation. Mainly I use machine learning such as neural networks, but for this paper we used only to check the validity of the normal geometric progression. Results of our study. According to our study, Kosovo and electricity distribution has been undervalued in the privatization process. Beta coefficient has been obtained from the Damodaran database in the range of 1.4. You know, this is one of our limitations, which is, I think when the paper will be extended a little bit more, we will be able to calibrate the beta coefficient for particular case for the CATS company. This is the model that has been built, and we used Monte Carlo to check the validity of this model. And I don't know if you see it well, it's a really huge table, and even me, I'm not seeing good here, but the normal geometric progression mainly is tested till the moment when the added value in the intrinsic value of the company is low. So increasing scale is starting to decline. As you could see, the year 10, I have bolded with red, but I don't know now if it is with red. We could see that Monte Carlo simulation delivered the same outcome as normal geometric progression. The value of the company, Kosovo and electricity distribution, stands in the range of 208 million. While the government of Kosovo has sold it for 26 million, which is, I don't know now, it depends on other scholars to find out the reasons. Cash flow from operation has been adjusted to free cash flow to the firm. You know, I couldn't put all the steps. There are huge adjustments that needs to go till to free cash flow to the firm. We use free cash flow to the firm because we have discounted it with weighted average cost of capital. While for other studies where they have stock markets, I don't use free cash flow, I use equity cash flow because I discount for cost of equity. And this is the cost of equity for the company, while it is also cost of debt. We use return on market on the model of cost of equity of capital asset pricing model from Standard & Poor's, because we considered that the investors has two choices between investing for particular returns in the CATS company or investing in Standard & Poor's with particular rate of return. So it's kind of opportunity cost of investing somewhere. As you could see in some years, you know, like cost of equity is going down. It is mainly because of the reason of performance of Standard & Poor's. And this is the cumulative cash flow. And this is the geometric progression, not normal geometric progression, but geometric progression delivered from Monte Carlo simulation with 10 years period. As you could see, in the year now 162, in the year 2025, in the year 2026, cumulative discounted cash flow is 162 million, while my normal geometric progression delivers in a range of 162 million and 500, because Monte Carlo simulation recognizes also the standard deviation, but the normal geometric progression does not recognize this issue, which is the limitation of the first model. But it's the first time that with neural network is much problematic to match these two issues, but I saw that with Monte Carlo simulation they are matching, which says that maybe Monte Carlo simulation is better model. So what are the general outcomes? So the intrinsic value of the company, not the market price. We should be very clear in this issue. The company gets intrinsic value, and then it depends on the market forces, supply and demand, that moves the price up and down until it equilibrates. But even stock markets, as we know, according to Eugene Fama, markets deviates from the mean, but they adjust their own excesses, and this is proved, and nobody could confirm the other way around. So the value of a company could go up and down for Kosovo electricity and distribution, but it cannot move so far from 208 million. This is our model. Why it is deviating from the price that have been sold by the government, we don't know. Maybe other scholars will find out. But there is a huge deviation. And I'm not sure if I had here internal rate of return. I'm sorry, I don't have. But we stimulated if you would invest 1 million euro in the Kosovo and electricity distribution as a shareholder, payback period is less than 1 year. So it's very profitable industry with a huge of potential. Future research might clarify the deviation between fundamental value and price sold. I am able to do that for Prague stock market and for other markets because I check these deviations with, like Alban, with a regression analysis. But you can, I don't know how you can do that for privatization of our, maybe somebody from here will help me and we will do it. Or maybe somebody who did this privatization, they know it, but maybe they don't want to tell it. I don't know, that is their issue. So future research might help to clarify this issue. Thank you a lot for listening.
Thank you very much, Florin. Any question from the audience? Pyetje?
Hi, and thank you for that analysis. My name is Ted Heisler. I'm with USAID. I actually spent several years doing privatization in the Czech Republic in the 90s. I don't pretend to have an answer to your question, but I'd be happy to work with you more on it. My question to you now is, was there any investment commitment made into the company on behalf of the purchasing or the acquiring? Was there any requirement to invest additional money into the company at the point of privatization? Were there any follow-on commitments that had to be realized by the buyer?
If I'm sure your question is if there were any requirement to
Was there a requirement? Was there a requirement for additional investment directly into the company by the acquiring investor?
By the potential investor, you mean?
Yes, not the potential, the actual.
Investor.
Was there a mandate, was there a requirement to invest additional money into KEDS in addition to the purchase price paid, which went to the government?
Yeah, very good question. In my other model that I use for the airport, there was a requirement according to the contract, 100 million euro, but I haven't seen any requirement for the KEDS company. But if there is, so you just need to put minus the level of investments there. So it will show you the value of the company. But we evaluated the company on their potential, because the problem is that these companies had assets in the future which were underutilized. So you can't evaluate the company based on what it was, but what it will be. That's why it's the price of the company. Price reflects the future outcomes, not the past of the company. This is it. I know, even you cannot build a hypothesis in this issue, because hypothesis you can build for the past, but not for the future. But we put only one main research question. if the company was properly valued in the privatization process. Maybe somebody has other models. Maybe government has better models. Or maybe the company was so illiquid that they needed to decline the price to sell it. But experience, as you mentioned, that you know the privatization issue in the Central Europe, when they saw that there is not a good momentum for selling the company, they waited for the better momentum. But, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, sir, for your question. Any other question? Pyetje tjera për audiencës? Atëherë faleminderit Florin, si duket nuk kemi pyetje tjera, faleminderit edhe një herë. Now we will continue with Dr. Polina Anancherenkova from Russia and her working paper on economic and social potential of the women's, youth, family and entrepreneurship of the golden age. The floor is yours, Dr. Anancherenkova.
Good day, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for invitation to take part in this science event. It is a very big honor for me. So I want to speak about entrepreneurship. And I want to say that in Russia, usually we have another style of presentation. That's why it will not be literature survey or it will not be methodology. So I'm sorry if you are waiting for it, but I will speak about important and necessary facts. And if you want to know more about it or some details, I will send you my paper with great pleasure, and I will be ready for answer your questions. So, small business plays a very important role in all kinds of economies, and I want to underline that if in the country a small and medium business produced less than 40% of GDP, investments in the national economy doesn't give the necessary economic effect. So, my presentation consists of 4 parts. The first part is about family business development. Generally, I can say that only this kind of business, the distance between employment and unemployment is very short, because especially family enterprise is a form of small entrepreneurship characterized by the fact the members of the same family and their relatives are the owners and employees of their enterprises. Especially important is the family business in rural areas, and if we speak about Russia, the creation of a full-fledged agricultural sector in Russia without the development of family farms is simply impossible. Effective foreign experience shows that the development of family business is only possible with the systematic governmental support. For example, the Singapore government offers the production companies more than 90 various preferential programs. The same programs we can find in Finland, the United States, Kazakhstan, or other countries. The concept of family business is partly reflected only in 2 federal laws in Russia. That's why it is not enough for initialization of this economic phenomenon, and therefore there is no possibility to exercise statistical supervision at the government level, monitor the dynamic of family businesses as a separate category of the business sector, and some other facts. That's why it is difficult to make any statistics about this sector of small business. The second part of my presentation is development of women's entrepreneurship. So everybody said that women play a very big role now in Kosovo, so the same situation in Russian business. That's why it is necessary to say some words. What is the problem? I can't understand what is the problem with my presentation. Who can help me?
You have to use this arrow just to go.
Yes, I tried to do it, but there is no result. Here, no.
Is this working? What's that? It's okay.
What do you do?
Click here. You're showing to go back and forth.
Okay.
You want to go backward?
Yes, no need.
That's
Thank you very much. So I will continue. So I'm sorry, I had to skip some slides. I will speak about women's entrepreneurship. Here are some facts about labor market, Russian labor market, and about statistics of gender statistics of my country. So, I want to speak some facts about the survey that was made by Support of Russia. Support of Russia is the non-government and non-commercial company. It has different kinds of activity, and one of them is to prepare sociological studies. So, according to the report, distinguishing the future of the Russian female business is a social orientation. Despite the fact that more and more women are successfully engaged in business, many of them think that there are still barriers in business environment. 75 employed women think that the main obstacle of opening their own business in Russia is a lack of funding. The second of them is an insufficient level of business competences. The study of Support of Russia illustrates a high potential of entrepreneurship among Russian women. 30% women employed today are already developing their business at the same time. 30% are determined to develop it, and 37% may present themselves as the founder of the company, but they are not yet ready for this step. And 24% theoretically could make up their mind on it, but not in the coming years. And only 10% in this group of respondents replied, "Business is not for me." Okay, I must say that there are no any special government program for supporting women business, but it should be noted that in Russia now there are some initiatives realized to promote and support female entrepreneurship, including the Support of Russia and some other companies. As a rule, these are private initiatives of successful entrepreneurs, including men, who wish to share their knowledge and experience with women who try themselves in business. So, for example, there is an active developing program for women implemented with support of Rybakov Fund. Rybakov Fund was established by three very famous Russian businessmen. They are real oligarchs, so they decided to spend some money for women. Within the program, there are 6-month sessions for women with the arrangement of some kinds of activities, such as group work, mentoring, meetings with foreign colleagues, with businessmen or some other people. So, for example, there is an actually developing program implemented with support of Rybakov Fund. Within the program, as I said, women can develop their business on or to start up their business. Qualitative analysis of the program impact held by results of the first flow showed that 98% participants noted the positive impact of the program of their life in general, and that 81% participants continued to meet in the group and after the end of the program. So I want to underline once more that it is not a government supporting, it's only a private initiative, and there are different kinds of the same program in Russia developing now. The third part of my presentation is developing of youth entrepreneurship. So in Kosovo it is an interesting fact too. Developing of youth entrepreneurship is related to the fact that young people are mostly ready to changes. They get used to new conditions easier and faster, which of course very important for modern society. Young people generally are known for their creative thinking that positively affects of business and business competitiveness. I'm sure that in all countries we can find young talent like Mark Zuckerberg or some others who become rich only because of his entrepreneurship ideas. Today in Russia there are 39.6 million young citizens from 14 to 30 years, responding 27% total population of our country. From them, 89% are employed, and only 2% of them have their own business. By the way, for comparison in China, approximately 20% of young Chinese, have their own business. So we have potential to develop. The potential of entrepreneurship among the youth of Moscow and medium-sized cities, which population from 2,500,000 up to 1 million people. So it is not very big cities like Moscow, for example. It is middle cities. Increased concentration in medium-sized cities rather than in large ones, with population of 1 million and more. It is a very illustrative phenomenon. Experts say that in medium-sized cities there are worse employment conditions than in large cities, and therefore they are more focused on entrepreneurship. And if we will speak about small cities, young people are not eager to start their own business because they can't understand how can they find startup capital or just to start up. Because most of people usually in Russia say, oh, it's possible only in Moscow. It's not for me. According to the study of the, youth entrepreneurship in Russia is the most supported by federal and regional state programs, commercial companies, and private initiatives of some large businessmen. It should be noted that youth entrepreneurship at the present development state of economic relations plays, if not decisive, but one of the key values for development of the economy in the Russian Federation. And now we are waiting that young business will become a real driver for small business in different fields of our economy. And the fourth part of my presentation is about entrepreneurship of the golden age. A significant business potential has a population of the golden age, mostly retirees over 55 years. Businesses at the initiative of the people at the golden age has a number of advantages compared with young. Pensioners are less adventurous and less likely to engage in highly risky projects. Their management decisions are more informed. They implement a thorough business strategy that lets effortlessly correct tactical action. And according to my author survey, 94% pensioners are able to cover their cost at the expense of pension payments, and they need additional source of income. 84.5% respondents could potentially become entrepreneurs and maintain active economic activities. As possible types and direction of business activities for senior, the answer of the question, what types of entrepreneurial activity in your opinion is sustainable for pensioners? The respondents named the following: childcare, babysitting, tutoring, household repair, creation and development of various clubs by interest, projects in the field of tourism, short hikes, excursion, travels, and some others. Respondents say that they don't have any problem with startup capital, and approximately all of them said that their children and grandchildren are ready to make a financial support for them. Despite the fact that in Russia there are no federal or regional government programs to support entrepreneurship at the golden age, it should be noted that Russia now has a number of social projects to support entrepreneurship at this age, and one of them is a project Age of Happiness. And it is a project about people who after 5 live a very active life. So we must understand that people after 50 or 55 are healthy, still healthy, active, and they want to be socialized. They don't want to sit at home to watch TV and so on. And this kind of project helps them to be really active and to start their business. And of course we must speak not about small business. The business of golden age is like a micro business, but why not? If it is if it has big, maybe not big, but enough economical and social potential. And yes. And as a conclusion, I want to say that one speaker said that the most important to think not about employee payment, but about their skills. But I want to fix your attention for 2 negative trends. The first negative trend is maybe not about Kosovo, but it is about Russia. I mean demographic trend and moving young specialists to the foreign labor market. And the second negative trend is digitalization of some working process. So if we speak about the future labor market, we must remember that many people, especially young people, will not have chances to use their skills. And it is important to think about their future job, their future generally. So I have finished and I'm ready for answer for any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ananchikova.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, do një pyetje?
Any questions?
Po kemi një? Or no? Helen?
Thank you very much for your presentation. A quick and short question.
It's in English. The question is in English.
Sorry, will you speak English?
Yes, please, if I may. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very short question. In your presentation, I've seen that 94% of retirees are unable to, actually the amount of retirement is insufficient. I wonder, what is the pension in Russia that they get?
We must understand that the middle pension in Russia must be very different because of the different regions of Russia. The middle pension, I think it's about $180. No. Yes, $180. It's not very high. In Moscow, it's a little bit another. I think it is something about $300. $300, yes. That's why many old people try to continue their working period. They have no chance to sit at home. Any questions more?
Ndonjë pyetje tjetër?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Ananchikova. And the last presentation for today is the presentation from a current student from the University of Manchester.
is Mr. Santiago Isa. He has a very interesting topic to present today. It's about the current conditions that countries face for developing through industrialization, and also potential alternatives to industrialization for development, if there are any. Mr. Isa, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor and happy birthday. My topic is more a political one rather than an economic, even though it has a strong economic underpinning. I'm trying to make us think about if industrialization is the path for development. We will review current conditions that countries face nowadays to come along the development process. This is a brief review of my curriculum, so you get to know me. I developed my career in the private sector, specializing in investment banking and corporate finance, actually developing industrial and services projects in Latin America, where I had the opportunity to be hands-on on the matter and to face the real situations that entrepreneurs and businessmen face while trying to create new business opportunities. The core structure of the paper is as follows. After the introduction, it has the theoretical background, which for the time and your faces, I will not be stopping a lot into it, but we will make a special focus on Sir Arthur Lewis' work on his famous paper, Economic Development with Unlimited Supplies of Labor, which I want you to remember the title, please, for what's coming on. Afterwards, we will go through industrialization for development with three main components: planning for industrial development, when we will go a bit through Chenery's multi-sectorial analysis. We will also look at the current trends of industrialization to finally address the most pressing topic of today's agenda, which is automation and digitalization of production and jobs. Afterwards, we will mention a couple of alternative paths and some conditions that are required to finally making three main remarks in the conclusion about what is needed, or at least my personal view of what we need to pursue development. Okay. Theoretical background. Sir Arthur Lewis, he's the founding father of development economics. He made a very important contribution for the theory. He, of course, as many others with him, acknowledged capital accumulation as the engine for development. And he further explained the relationship existing between investment supply, industrialization, and later as the funnel or the channel to absorb all the labor supply that was in the agricultural sector. But the two main contributions that this paper made were, first of all, he took it out from economics and put it into a political perspective. He presented us development economics as a political science that is concerned in the problems of underdevelopment, as well as a multidimensional course of social, economic, institutional, and political change. Keep in mind about the title, Unlimited Supplies of Labor. His idea was that companies would reinvest their profits, and therefore they would start consuming labor as they will be bigger and bigger. And at the point we would see wages going up, we would see social mobilities going up. In the current conditions, we will see that in one of the last parts of the chapter, this paper, we will see that we might start to question this in the current conditions. So, what is industrialization? First of all, it's fairly obvious, but it's good to talk about. We can say that it's this desirable stage after a growth process where most countries would expect to reach. I particularly like Rostow's, despite his political bias, but I particularly like Rostow's view that, I will quote him, "This is the stage in which an economy demonstrates that it has the technological and entrepreneurial skills to produce not anything, but anything that it chooses to produce." So in the 1960s, we start to talk about specialization into the production. Okay. Moving forward, we had Generis with his multi-sectorial approach to a development process or development politics that analyzing the structural disequilibriums that an economy has, we cannot, and this is, I'm glad to be the last one because this paper covers a bit of most of the previous presentations. We cannot expect to use the same politic or the same set of tools for every country, as you well said, especially IMF. We cannot bring a set of politics for a specific political model and try to make it work everywhere. With different countries' structures and different supplies of the productive factors. But one thing that is quite important of this, that it's been acknowledged during the whole conference, is that we must emphasize the importance for a country to secure a supply of foreign currency as a key factor for development. We need to work on the external pressures and the external environment to build upon it. This also has an interesting effect, if we can say. Growth rate will act on investment through its effects on the aggregate demand. High rates of growth will lever the magnitude on industrial investment. This is why we must be very, very careful. Forgive me, I will not follow strictly the presentation. I prefer to make it more like a conversation, so you don't get bored at this point. I was saying, we must be very careful of what type of policies we follow. If we start, just to follow the previous conversation, with a restrictive policy, such as those of the IMF or other multilateral agencies that restrain public expenditure and therefore they restrain consumption, it is obvious that we will have, in the short term, a reduction of growth. Because most developing countries, in the first stages, they grow on consumption. Because investment is too short, it's too little. It's a natural course for us. I come from Argentina, sorry. For developing economies and emerging economies, it's a natural path to start creating enough economic performance, sort of saying, to advance into the following stages. This is one thing that, water, please. Sorry, I'm. Another thing we need to consider is the effect of foreign direct investment. Sorry, forgive me, I'm with a cold, it's killing me. Sorry. We also need to address, while planning for development, the sociological aspects of our countries. Foreign direct investment doesn't come alone. It usually comes with a, I'm so sorry. It comes with pressures, as we not only receive the funds, but we receive social pressures and social and management standards, as if you will, or different social norms that are imposed in the places of work where these companies or this fund work. Because the idea is that they want to feel comfortable with their investment, of course, and they will try to impose certain levels of, let's say, of formalisms that they have in their country homes. And we need to see if we are prepared for that as well. So, we must not disregard this, the political effects that, and the impact that a poorly designed policy or structure might play absorbing these investment shocks. This is why I speak about a political issue and not an economic one. How far are we going to allow or are going to be flexible while trying to attract foreign investment? Are we going to be flexible in the tax sector, lowering taxes, making us more competitive? Are we going to have looser environmental regulations? These are the things that we need to consider. And the problem is that sometimes for short-term political gains, the long run is not properly addressed or overseen. So, how is industrialization today? I want to show you this slide. It's from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. This study covers 66 economies, which account for 84.9% of the world's GDP and almost 70% of its population. This study provides us some significant insights about economic structure and participation regarding the creation of new businesses. This is important because this shows us what are the trends not only for the established big companies, but for the small entrepreneurs, as my colleague was saying. And this is interesting. I prepared you a small slide with some numbers. Countries are repeating their history. Big industrialized economies, they are deindustrializing. And in this frame of global value chains, they are searching for the most competitive places to allocate the specific tasks that fit for that. So we are seeing the globe, the entire world being managed as a huge corporation. And this is a huge pressure for development because innovation-driven economies such as OECD countries, they are keeping from themselves their high value-added activities, which nowadays account for most of their, almost 70% of their GDP, which is services and knowledge-based activities, while outsourcing all production. And we have this. Over the last 20 years, the industrialized economies have seen reduced in almost 12% the share of industrial value added to their GDP. But what is more interesting is that the absorption from developing economies hasn't been in the same proportion. It has been only 3.20%. So we also see that there is a gap that has vanished. I would say in these terms, we are seeing that production processes are being commoditized, which will make them perfectly substitutable, if that's correct, the word. However, when we see GDP per capita growth today, we observe that the main economies, most of them are growing faster than OECD members, but the gap remains extremely high. And I would like to stop here, and there has been a very recent issue of the McKinsey report, and to talk about this. One sec, please. Earlier this morning, one of the ministers said that Kosovo would need 100 years to peer with the OECD members with current growth rates. Industrialization by automation and digitalization is expected to add to the current growth rate at least 2% growth points, just by digitalization in the central economies. So we see that the catching up effect, it's very, very hard. Because they not only have the experience, because we have to remember that being industrialized, they already underwent this process of offshoring. Their civil society, their economic structure is more flexible than us from developing countries that we haven't gone through that stage yet. So this adds us a further pressure. Please. So, considering what I was saying, we need to consider the argument and to some extent the evidence that which are the quality of the jobs that are going to be generated in this modern economy. Export-directed economies, some authors claim that they exploit their employees without providing living wages. We see the impact above all in Southeast Asia, with higher levels of inequality, a lot of contamination, and a lack of civil and human rights at a point that are very concerning. Nevertheless, as was claimed earlier, for economic standards, their growth rate is quite good. We've seen it in the previous slide, almost 7%. So we should also think of what do we actually want. We just want nice numbers, or we are going to pursue more equitable numbers? It's the questions that arise into my mind, of course. And then we get to today. This is a process that it's ongoing. We have seen the political, and we are seeing the political impacts of automation. In the last elections, I would like to recall, if some of you maybe haven't been following the news, but one of the main claims from the ultra-right in Holland wasn't about the immigrants. They were in Rotterdam port, and they were claiming that robots, automated transportation, was stealing their jobs. And that is why they needed a strong leader, a strong political party to overcome this situation. So one of the main arguments, and then of course it came all the refugee crisis and stuff, which is very serious, but for the first time, we listen to people complain about machines and to some extent make political decisions based on their results. From the research, we can observe that studies shows that, last study from McKinsey shows us that even us, we are not exempt from this risk. 140 million knowledge workers are at risk of automation. We have seen it in previous lectures. Econometrics today might get obsolete. They were invented to predict behavior, to analyze trends. Now we have big data, hot data almost instantly, you know? And we need to consider like the real impacts of this situation. Moreover, for developing economies and for advanced economies as well, 60%, some say 47%, of positions have a minimum of 30% of automatable activities. Again, some say, invert the numbers and say that up to 70% are keen to be automatized. But when we bring it to the development world, the labor force signifies 1.2 billion workers are at risk of being changed or replaced by a machine. This, of course, it follows the true nature of industrialization, which is the search for increased productivity. And, of course, the effects on the decline both in prices and spending on manufactured goods. So that gives a lot to think, don't you think? So, do we have alternative path? I personally think we do. We can jump from, especially for countries that are ongoing a process of industrialization, we might be at the verge of, if this automation process goes at the pace that it's going, which is very fast, we might not be able to go through an industrialization process. So maybe we need to start thinking of going beyond, develop a sustained service-based economy, which might not sound good, especially with the topic, but there are some key components that we have talked about or have been underlying the entire presentation and the entire journey today that it's interesting, and I would like to make here a point of Kosovo. We need to ensure somehow a sustainable supply of foreign exchange, because we are going to face a world when, as I said, production activities will be a commodity. We will not be competing. Those countries that are efficiency driven, we need to evolve. We will be competing for highly automated factories, and especially with high levels of quality, of course. So somehow we need to ensure a supply of foreign exchange to be able to balance our balance of payment and to keep our inner markets going on. This is why I think it's important. And this is particularly tricky for Kosovo. The second point is a competitive exchange rate policy, which for Kosovo it's quite difficult as you cannot manage your own policy. However, Kosovo has, in my limited knowledge about your country and for what we're saying today, an opportunity. You still have competitive wages. You won't have to, if a good plan is implemented, if a good process is implemented, you will not have to suffer what countries like Spain did. As they couldn't devaluate, they had to do an endorse devaluation and cut wages to gain competitivity, which was terrible for the economy and the country. It was very painful. I had the opportunity to see it myself when living in Spain. But the key point here is that countries need to develop a sustained framework where institutions, the rule of law, and education are the central pillars of this strategy. And I think this has been a key topic in the entire this Congress. We might call it like business environment. You can put any name you want, but we need a profound change, something that goes to our fundamentals as countries to make us attractive to the eyes of others and allows us to be more enticing to be invested in. And finally, I would like to conclude by mentioning that development isn't just economic growth. When we observe the effects that industrial pace of change has on a society, its distributive effects and the pressure on its institutions that not always are positive. We have seen many cases of corruption big companies pushing and bullying countries to abide to their wishes. This has been an exchange coin worldwide, actually. We need to start considering other ways. We also need to consider that the middle-skilled workers, and especially the low-skilled workers, are at a severe risk due to this fast pace of technological advancements. But we also can understand it or take it as a warning call for governments. This wave is not yet upon us. And I don't, please, I don't mean to sound apocalyptic, but we still have time to start preparing the youth. And Kosovo has a lot of young people. You have the time to start training yourselves to what is going to come. And I don't think it's like we need a huge change. From the government, we can start promoting or fostering at schools, teach children how to program. Start developing the tools that children need and that they will need. Go to LinkedIn, go to whichever job site you will find, and 8 out of 10 jobs are technology related. They will ask you for programming, e-views, which one of the basic ones. They take for given that we know Excel. And at school, they teach us Excel. This might sound like, what is he saying? But recall some years ago, people would say it's exclusive to have Excel. So are we going to get to that point to start teaching them the new technologies that we require for everyday jobs, or are we going to be proactive about it? And finally, this is more like a wish, but we should start thinking of industrialization only as a stepping stone, not a goal, because we will see the world being driven by machines. If you think I'm exaggerating, look at this. Uber started like a cooperative economy company. They suddenly found out, like, why should I share my profits with the driver? I just better build an automated car. One guy or woman left without a job, and one of the most basic tasks, which is transportation. So I think this is a lot to think about. And by diversifying our economies, mainly working on the institutions and education, I think this is the path to achieve sustained development and hedge against foreign fluctuations. I will end by, on Friday I was in Paris. I had the opportunity to share a conversation with UNESCO Chief Operating Officer, and we were talking about the development of career path. And UNESCO's views, I won't claim it as official, of course, but their research suggests that it won't be technical skills what is going to build all the big difference here. We need to start developing soft skills as well. All the hard work is going to be produced by machines, but we still have the human contact, and we have to develop empathy. We have to develop language, of course. We need to communicate each other. We need to be good salesmen, which is going to be very important, because we will have 100,000 Nike shoes produced by one machine, but we need to sell them. Okay, thank you very much. That was it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Issa. Now, let's see if we have any question from the audience. Po, no?
Ju falenderoj për prezentimin, me të vërtet, prezentim shumë I qartë dhe I thukt, dhe kisha dëshirë edhe Kosovë.
Forgive me. Now I have it. Sir.
Ju falenderoj për prezentimin e juaj, me të vërtet thas që vini nga një vend shumë industrializuar, sa kuptova. Dhe me një rritje ekonomike, besoj që edhe Kosova kishte pas dëshirë që ato modele të merë, ato rritje ekonomike të merë, jo nga remitancat, si që folë ma herët në sesionin e parë, po të merë nga rritja industrializimit, nga rritja ekonomike të bëhet me të vërtet nga energjia dhe disa sektor tjerë, e jo rritje ekonomike të mvarët nga remitancat, si tha dhe edhe zotriju ma parë I fondi monetar ndërkombëtar, se rritja ekonomike ka qenë 2.diçka%, e këta e thanë që ka qenë edhe 4%, por ajo rritje ka qenë jo reale, nga remitancat nuk ka rritje. Rritje ekonomike do të ketë nga energjia, do të ketë nga industria, vërtet edhe ndërmarrjet e vogla dhe të mesme sigurisht do të ketë rritje si në vendet e tjera. Prandaj ju e përmend, vërtet tu përmend që Kosova duhet 100 vite të shkojë për të arritur vendet e OCD-s. Ne në vërtet qeveria e Kosovës ma përpara ka bon një platformë, një strategji zhvillimit ekonomik që një përrritje ekonomike edhe ka thënë në vërtet ka prezentuar në atë rritje që vendet Kosova duhet të shkojë 30 vite të ketë rritje 8% të ekonomisë të arrinë vendet në ajo. Prandaj kisha me admiru edhe përvojën e juve dhe pak të na tregoni si është bërë rritja ekonomike në vendet e juaja dhe modelet e juaja dhe në vendet si keni kaluar tranzicionin. A ka pas vështirësi në vendet e juaja dhe përvoja ju, se ndoshta pak po të ngarkoj, por kisha pas dëshirë të ndëgjoj edhe këto. Ju faleminderit.
First of all, from the Argentinian perspective, we are having, actually we're kind of enduring again a transition. The last 12 years where Argentina, it's an industrial economy, but how we got there, it's easy to answer, but it's difficult to implement in the current conditions of the world. Argentina got his boom of industrialization during the 1950s, where after World War II we substituted imports and developed high technology within the country and regionally. Actually, we work on a regional level, and that particular thing, I think it might be very interesting for Kosovo, not looking within borders, but look at our neighbors too. And in my particular experience, I come from the north of Argentina, which was a less developed region of the country. And what we did as the private sector and with a relationship with the government, we worked hand by hand from the government perspective, we help them develop industrial parks with special taxation to foster the wheel of investment. We also provided them technical support, and the government itself did not provide money per se. They subsidized it and provided warranties for small companies to go to the financial markets to pursue their productive activities, always with ensuring that each productive activity would generate employment, of course. In this process, which was part of my job, of course, we needed to ensure the viability of these companies. So as a sort of speak, to ensure that it's money well spent. This has provided good outcomes, actually. in my region. And we even developed a seal that it's more to make people feel proud. It's like buy local, buy produced in your region. And this might be small things in a highly competitive world, but one thing I skipped to mention, and I'm sorry I'll come to this, is that in efficiency-driven economies, nowadays, we don't see people investing in productive activities. Might call it common sense, but people invest in retail. The common people, they just go to services. And it's a big problem because people think like, I can sell chairs and it's okay. And then, as was mentioned earlier, before the 4 years they fail. Because they have the will, we all have the will to improve, to develop, but we might not have the technical skills needed to do it. This is why I think that in a long run, specialized education, it's crucial. But we also can start in the short term to produce, like Riinvest, to produce think tanks and specialists and make them spread their knowledge to foster each activity. I don't know if I answered your question. Thank you. Any question?
Okay, we have one question here from the panel.
It's not kind of question, but more like a comment, because we ended up now in these theory stuffs, it's my words against, it's your words against mine.
Yes.
There is no ending story. I prefer more to comment about the results and, but anyway, you mentioned the industrialization process. And I don't know the story of other countries, but concerning Kosovo, I was following some of the sectors, how they were evolving, and Alban had a really good paper about the influence of International Monetary Fund and these international financial institutions, which they work according to some consensus to spread their influence in particular country with their policies. And that doesn't mean that those kind of policies are coming from God and we should accept them like they are. We should comment them. I don't know, for instance, in my point of view, different scholars think that privatization process, one of the forms of reindustrialization of our country, I think has failed to deliver the outcomes intended. Many countries, if you see, we can't go to England and United States and see how the capitalist system is built there, because there was for 200 years there, since the main ideas of Adam Smith. But we could see countries of ex-Soviet Union, how they transformed their economy, how complex it was and how they suffered in the transformation process. If you could see the banking industry in those countries, how much they suffered with the banking industry, but they created a competitive environment in their banking industry. Now interest rates in those countries are 3 to 4%. And now in our country they were standing in a range 18, 17%. You could have good ideas, but if you don't have money, you cannot do them. First thing. Second, we failed in many sectors, almost. Our economy is competitive only in those industries where CEFTA has been able to influence. The other industries, they are oligopolies, monopolies, and according to basic microeconomic principles, monopolies and oligopolies are inefficient in their price and also in their outputs that they delivered. So, I don't know, the discussions, your discussion is very huge, it's broad, but I think we failed in many dimensions of transformational process. The way we conducted privatization, look at the countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Latvia, and you could go even farther. They didn't privatize directly, how we did. We sold to one person, And one of the things was so fast to transform our ownership structure, but they created the stock market because they are all our properties. You cannot sell them without huge consensus in the society. They created the stock market, they spreaded the shares in the society, they transformed very slowly the banking industry, and they have a stock market which is a huge substitute for the banking industry. Now, which is our substitute for the banking industry? Nothing. You have, previously the Minister of Trade declared that they are creating a fund, you know, like credit fund that would help loans on the private sector, which in my opinion it will have no effect at all. Banks are sleeping with 360 million euro in their accounts in our country, and they are not bringing in the economy. They are huge money. We have 1.2 billion euro of pension fund invested outside. They are helping countries all over the world, but not Kosovo, because we don't have enough capacity of people to bring those money back. We have around 60 million euro from the privatization fund. They were sleeping abroad, helping other countries. They are not activated in our society. And Minister of Finance was saying that we emit bonds in international markets, 300 to 400 million euro, while we have our money that are standing outside. So I think we have some more deep problem than standing on the theory. Constructing the financial system and privatization process, I'm just mentioning Jeffrey Sachs. He was really involved in this transformational issue. It's more an art than a science. It's a way how you construct it. You know, they tried simple here and they got bad results. Thank you. I don't have any question. It's just maybe you have a comment about my...
If I may, yes, and also related with what the gentleman said. Your arguments, to be fair, regarding Kosovo, I'm not very much aware of. However, one thing I noticed, and this is not a critique of course, but this is the thing of thinking local. As for wealth management, I would expect that I have a sovereign fund invested overseas. Particularly, I don't see it wrong, because what you are doing is by buying quality securities, you're protecting your own people, and for money that it's going to be spent in the long run. So regarding that issue, of course, it has some considerations regarding the trust that you show to your own productive activities and your own economy. It's interesting, but in that point, I don't think it's so critical. But regarding the other things, you mentioned some examples, and the common denominator of those examples is like the global view. As I was saying, we must think regionally. Are we going to build a company in Kosovo, forgive me for my lame examples, that produces bottles to sell only to Kosovo, or that we can sell it to our neighbors? This is the kind of view that we have to make our entrepreneurs, our businessmen incorporate. We must, sometimes it's hard, especially for when, with our personal experiences and our personal, our life in general, but we need to incorporate from the little ones until the old. We live in a connected world. We must think outside the box. This is what it will determine the share of success. One thing is that it's also important, this overseas investment fund that you mentioned, it's providing returns to the Kosovari economy every time it brings back money. So it's also a sustainable fund of resources as well. But I don't know, that's some comment about what you said. Regarding the industry, privatization and local politics, again, I think it goes more with transparency and public awareness. than more just political or as an isolated act. That's all. You had a question, sir?
Yes. Gjitha diskutimet edhe referatet ka qenë nivel. Të po thom si që shmë thanë, si bashkëpunëtore e Riinvestit. Po shoqërisht s'mujt të daj asë njo, vetëm që shkam ka të gacmu ma shumë të referati Albanit edhe i kolegut Isa, patem Santiago Isa, edhe tha që i vi pe Argentine. Një në nonë, ka kritikon ka pak fondin monetar ndërkombëtar, ndërsa unë në tjetër, sa po i kuptoj unë, është të je mbrojit. Deshte të thomë që politika, deshte të bëj një pyetje që politika fondit monetar, a mund të aplikohet njësoj në të gjitha vendet? First question. Second, atër po folje dhe ma tutje, ju keni përmend, përveç çështjeve specifike keni përmend edhe inovacionet, si motor i zhvillimit e ekonomisë botërore, respektivisht e ekonomisë globale. Por njëkohësisht, inovacionet në ndikimin e funksionit qëllimor të ndërmarrjes, ajo është maksimalizimi i fitimit dhe eliminimi i frikës për ekzistencë. Deshte të ja bëj një pyetje se ajo kryesisht ka kursyer fuqinë punëtore, a nuk i ka kursyer dhe që më thonë këto burimet natyrore. Kjo është një, që më thonë, një çështje thelbësore të cilën ne duhet ta dimë dhe duhet të mendojmë vetë. Ati djali deshte t'ju përgjigj që thënë në shpjegoni politikat ekonomike. Mirë është me ditë edhe politikat ekonomike të Argentinës e të tine. Por kryesisht duhet të bazohem edhe në institucionet formale të na, edhe në institucionet jo informale dhe të vjen deti në gërshetim, se pa di unë mi vesh pa më të tëtuë me dalë në për bojnë halë ke hajgarë me mu, ose kuptu mu jo, ne duhet të dërlidhëm zhvillimin tonë ekonomik në përmes të strukturës tonë shoqërore. Ore, do më thonë si tjetër, ju dhatë mendimin, se si duhet të i kalot kjo situatë. Se inovacionet jënë shkaku kryesor i rritjes së pabaragjisë në nivelin botëror dhe në nivelin global. Sa që me zhvillim ekonomik me krejt është në rregull ajo. Unë kom një vizion tjetër, jo temin, por që e kom përkrahtë e vizion, është vizioni i Piketit, i Stiglicit edhe i Schillerit. Të tretë këta janë laureat të çmimit Nobel. Propozojmë që të vehet tatimi progresiv. Progresiv edhe në thashe progresiv, përveç asaj duhet të favorizohen politika ose ajo do më thonë favorshme, të cilat e bën gërshetimin midis ose gërshetimin e promovimit të zhvillimit ekonomik me çështjet sociale dhe me çështjet konkrete si tillë dhe vënia e taksave në robot dhe në inteligjencën artificiale. Schilleri e shpjegon këtë sap, në mënyrë që këta që dalin për punë të rekrutohen për punë të reja. Unë që të e vetëm edhe diçka të eshte të thamë. Duhet të dhe kem parasysh, zotëri, Kosova ka kalu në për 2 akumullime fillestare të kapitalit. Akumullimi socialist që bazuar në teorinë e preobrazhenësit, ju profesor, tjetër edhe në ajo teoria preobrazhenësit ka pas për qëllim realizimin e revolucionit industrial. Se socializmi shtetëror, kur që s'ka bëhet tjetër, vetëm e ka zhvillu industri. Dhe këte sa ka mujtë dhe sa ka pas nivelin si tillë. Revolucion që akumullimi kapitalisht, në vend që në vjen dhe këte të zhvillimi, ne në ka paraqit një dy çështje që duhet e largohen si tilla, urinë e ujkut, që ekziston thashë uria ujkut si tillë, edhe shkatrimin e klasës së mesme, së shtresës së mesme. Në Kosovë shpeshher qysh më thonë, e ngatrojnë mikroburgjezin me shtresën e mesme. Edhe njoni më tha mikroburgjezia ka armërinë. Unë ja bëjsha me temën që shtresa mesme është motori kryesor i zhvillimit ekonomik, ajo mikroburgjezia. Se në bazë regleve të punës e ki e krijon edhe filozofinë tonë. Ajo krijon edhe çështja filozofike e personit edhe i shoqërisë. Ju faleminderit.
Profesor, për këtë pyetje ma e gjatë. Po shpresoj që yes.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
First of all, I must say I got a bit lost in a part due to translation, but regarding my views of IMF, the first question, I might have given you this idea, but one thing I do think about their own set of policies, I think was one of the main first thing I mentioned. IMF, they might not do it officially, but one of the main conditions that IMF imposes to countries to start in one of the programs, it's a preventive devaluation. And my first question is, how do you suggest something without studies? Do they take a look? They don't do it. Scholars do it ex post facto when we analyze the elasticities of the effects of devaluation on the foreign exchange. So this, from the very beginning, they are just saying to you, I got a flu, take Valium. I got cancer, take Valium. It's the same. They, in the core, they do not change their recommendations. And this is very, very complicated. It has proven to have significant negative impacts. We can see it with econometric studies on something, but I am from a country where our Gini index in the 70s was 0.30. We implemented IMF stabilization programs because actually not many people know, but the first goal of IMF is stabilization. Then it comes growth. Think about it for a second only. They want to stabilize the balance of payment at any cost at the end. Because I said it earlier, I think it's in this one, we need a sustainable supply of foreign exchange, but again, at what cost? I don't know if I clarified my personal perspective about IMF, if you want after to. In the second part, talking about Piketty, Stiglitz and Schiller, I think you said, I do abide for the they promote a socialist welfare system. And I do think we're heading that way. My personal view, we are seeing it now in Finland. They are implementing a universal stipendium. From the market perspective, and I'm going to be very bold to say it, as I don't have research that will support this, of course, it's just forecasting. We might have high levels of unemployment due to automation, innovation, and all that situation. But installing a universal stipendium and income source in the short term for countries will be quite effective. But it will also be a cap for consumption. And countries eventually will be driven more than to production for consumption and public expenditure as drivers of growth. I'm not talking in the short run, I'm talking in quite the long run when this trend settles. Are we going to be able to sustain 2% growth rates in developed economies with a living wage of 2,000 euros, 1,500 euros? Countries cannot face to pay their current pensions in the European Union. There's a huge deficit because population is getting older. So this is a structural situation that it must be addressed. What I think is going to happen, apart from this, for the financing of this system, we need to implement, and it's good to implement a progressive taxation system for individuals and companies. So we don't penalize the poor with regressive taxes such as VAT or other consumption-based tax systems. However, we also have the pressure of this global view. We see it in the European Union. Countries go to Ireland to pay the taxes. Within OECD countries, they fight like cats within them to get most companies to pay lower taxes in their countries. And it is the greatest challenge, I think, that European Union and the world has. We need to attack tax havens to start building on a sustainable development path. Apart from that, I would like to add that, so I was going to mention, I think that the future of innovation and automation will be marginal productivity taxation for robots. Somehow we will, I think, we will be able to develop a taxation system that will make robots by the taxation system as expensive as human labor. If we cannot modify the entire, cannot substitute all labor for other positions. That's might be a path to overcome this future problem that we will have. I don't know if anybody has other question or comment.
Profesor, po i lëm në vend tjetër, mbasi që të përfundon do të kemi kohë prapë të diskutojmë, këta do të jenë këtu edhe për një kohë me ne. Kemi edhe çështje tjera për diskutu pastaj. Okej, shumë shkurt lutna.
Shumë shkurt. Unë deshta të them që patjetër duhet e di problemi që paraqiten me tatimin ose me vendin e tatimit në robotëve dhe në inteligjencë. Por një takim sa më i vogël do të jetë, duhet të vendoset me qëllim të ripërtrirjes ose më mirë me thotë të zgjidhjes së problemit të papunësisë. Edhe në Evropë, edhe gjithkund tjetër. Prandaj kush fiton aty? Fiton ai që e ka rezervu inovacionin, e ka rezervu robotet edhe i zaventson domethënë fuqinë punëtore si tillë. Thank you.
Okej, faleminderit shumë profesor. Me qenë se pyetje tjetër nuk ka, shumë shkurt lutna.
I want a coffee with the professor, please.
Unë dua ta përsëris edhe një herë. Unë e pyeta zotëriun nga Argentina sepse përvojat e tyre na do neve shumë. Ne vetëm pak, neve kemi strategji shumë, kemi ligje shumë që s'na përkojnë. Ne shumë mirë dim që teshat e dikujt në neve s'na vyjnë, por ne duhet të bazohemi në rritje ekonomike reale nga prodhimi, baza primore, industria, energjia, edhe sektori bujqësisë është që gjenon rritje ekonomike. Të gjitha këta parametra Kosovës i duhen për një rritje të mirë ekonomike dhe një rritje ekonomike reale, të bëhemi realist se Kosova ka nevojë për një rritje ekonomike nga këta parametra i zotëri i nderuar. Strategjit, ligjet, të gjitha këto kemi mjaft, por të pa implementueshme. Nuk janë duhet të kthehemi në retorik dhe të zbatojmë, sepse nga remithansat nuk ka rritje ekonomike. Nuk ka. Importi është afër 3 miliardë. Eksporti është 300 milion. Disbalans, ju lutem, disbalans në rreth 3-4% me 7%.
Ju lutem, kjo është kur të mundemi me vazhdu.
Vetëm deshta të shkallë se ne kemi nevojë për përvoja konkrete, por për strategji, për letrat e shkruara nuk kemi nevojë. Faleminderit.
Faleminderit për komentin gjithsesi. Mundeni me vazhdu, ju lutem pas përfundimit të kësaj konference. Profesor. Profesor, të lutem. Faleminderit, profesor. Mundemi me vazhdu pastaj diskutimin. Mr. Issa, I have a very, very short question and I hope to get a very short answer too. Going back to the main question of your paper, you mentioned some alternative channels to industrialization for economic development, such as FDIs. You also mentioned automation, digital revolution, and some other potential channels. But do you think that they are rather complementary channels?
Complementary channels. I think it's a very good question. Seen from a time perspective, I think that they will not come to complement, they will come to replace. And by replace, I don't mean that we will work in digitalization. We will be digitalized. All our jobs will be undergo this trend, which will be a huge increase in productivity. I will put you an Argentinian example, as the gentleman was asking, about the importance of developing knowledge-based activities. Argentina objectives. Argentina is we are a diversified economy, but one of our main sources of foreign exchange is agricultural production, mainly soy and meat. Nowadays we produce a food for 250 million people, even though we are only 40. Our goal to 2023 is to achieve 400 million tons in production of soy. How are we doing this? By adding technology to our production. We are developing a satellite network, in this case we jointly with Italy, that it will be actually an international network to be able to forecast with high levels of precision weather conditions. We are also producing satellites for companies to secure their own productions. We are even doing cheap stuff. We're using drones to control our production. I'm not trying to sell here science fiction. I'm trying to say we need to gather information. In order to do so we need to get on the road of digitalization. We need to study and we need to train people on big data. We need to train people on programming and on all the new skills that we need. Because eventually we will have to do it. And we are in the time to start doing now. Argentina has started in the city of Buenos Aires a pilot program, and it didn't need a huge political consensus that would take ages. It needed an executive order to start teaching programming in schools, afternoon classes, and it's going well. this is the small things that we can advocate in institutions like this one to try to foster new ideas and new conditions. There's a phrase of Cotto that I would like to recall. It's mainly for business administration, but it says something like, we cannot manage companies of the 21st century with the ideas of the 20th century and with the executives of the 19th century. So we need to challenge all the ideas we already have. We need to question the models. I'm doing it, and my idea with this presentation, it wasn't to come here with some econometrics, it wasn't to come here with this. I tried to make you think, and just to consider, perhaps when you go home, is actually what we got and what we know worth for the moment we are? Okay, I don't know if I...
Okay, I think we'll continue the discussion afterwards because I'm a bit more interested to know about your ideas. Thank you very much for your presentation and discussion here.
Thank you all.
Atëherë të nderuar panelishëm këtu, unë me pak fjalë po mundohem se të përmbledh aktivitetet ditore që kanë shënuar konferencën për 22 vjetorin e themelimit të Institutit Riinvest. Në sesionin e paraditës patëm një diskutim të frutshëm besoj me përfaqësues të institucioneve qeveritare, përfaqësues të qeverisë së Kosovës, institucioneve apo agjencive të pavarura të Kosovës, por ashtu edhe institucioneve ndërkombëtare si Banka Botërore dhe Fondi Monetar Ndërkombëtar. Nga të gjithë pothuajse u tha edhe nga të gjithë u tha që ka një progres si në aspektin makro, po ashtu edhe në aspektin mikro. Mirë po ende duhet bërë për të krijuar një klim më të favorshme biznesore në vend, në mënyrë që sektori privat të jetë shtytësi kryesor i zhvillimit dhe rritjes ekonomike në vend. Po ashtu patëm disa prezantime. Njëri ishte bashkëpunimi i fundit mes Institutit Riinvest dhe Ministrisë së Financave për publikimin e një pasqyre të rrethave ekonomike, një pasqyre e cila do të publikohet në baza rregull të tremujore. Pasqyre e cila do të paraqes pak a shumë gjendjen ekonomike në vend sa i përket nivelit makro. Po ashtu prezantuam edhe studimin e fundit të Institutit Riinvest, studimi i cili ka për qëllim të paraqes gjendjen e sektorit privat në Kosovë. U tha që vret një përmirësim i klimës biznesore në vend në vitin 2016 krahasuar me vitet paraprake, por ende të paktën në bazë të raportit të Bankës Botërore në të bërit biznes, Kosova mbetet ende prapa vendeve të rajonit, pra ende ka shumë punë për të bërë. Në sesionin e pasditës, konferenca u pasurua me prezantimin e disa punime shkencore, cilat i pamë i dëgjuam këtu, që i falenderoj prezantuesit edhe një herë, në emër të Institutit Riinvest për pjesëmarrjen e tyre dhe prezantimin e punimeve të tyre shkencore. Në këtë sesion, në këtë panel, në fakt, ka qenë para parë të marrin pjesë edhe tre studiues tjerë, po të cilët në momentin e fundit nuk kanë pasur mundësi të jenë fizikisht këtu në Prishtinë, nuk kanë pasur mundësi të udhëtojnë në Kosovë. Gjithsesi, këto punime do të publikohen si pjesë e një dokumentit përbashkët me dokumentet cilat u diskutuan sot këtu, si dhe konkluza dhe shënimet përmbyllëse të kësaj konference. Mua nuk më mbetet tjetër, veç të ju falenderoj një herë për pjesëmarrjen dhe shpresoj të shihemi në ngjarjet tona të ardhshme. Faleminderit një herë.